Karen Buckley, a 24-year-old student, went missing after a night out with friends at a nightclub on April 11th. Born in 1991 in Cork, Ireland, Karen was the youngest child and only daughter of John and Marion Buckley. Growing up, Karen was known for her kind and caring nature, always willing to lend a helping hand. This trait greatly influenced her career choices. After graduating from St. Mary's Secondary School in Mallow, pursued a degree in nursing at the University of Limerick. Her interest in occupational therapy eventually led her to Glasgow, where she enrolled in a master's program at Caledonian University. Karen arrived in Glasgow in January 2015 and moved into an apartment with 3 other female students who were also new to the area. On April 11, 2015, Karen and her flatmates went to a nightclub about 2 kilometers from their apartment. They arrived around 11:45 p.m. and had a great time. At about 1 a.m., Karen told her friends she was going to the restroom and would return soon. She took her purse and left her jacket on the table where the group was sitting. Her friends continued to enjoy themselves while Karen was away. After a while, they realized Karen had been gone longer than expected and should have returned by then. However, Karen was nowhere to be found. One of her friends searched the club for her but couldn't locate her. Trying to contact her by phone was also unsuccessful. She came with thought maybe Karen had gone home, but it was strange that Karen didn't tell anyone and left her jacket behind. The only explanation they could think of was that Karen might have met someone at the club and left with that person. With this thought in mind, they went to bed. However, when they woke up around noon, Karen's neighbors were surprised to find that she had not returned home. They called and messaged Karen on social media, but she didn't respond. Although they had only known Karen for a few months, they knew that this behavior was out of character for her. Instead of coming up with alternative explanations to reassure themselves, they decided to report her disappearance to the police and inform the Buckley family about what had happened. The Scottish police acted swiftly to find Karen, and her disappearance was publicized in the media. Her parents purged anyone with information to come forward. Meanwhile, detectives reviewed footage from the club's cameras and found evidence of Karen interacting with a mystery man. Within 36 hours, on April 13th, the man was identified as 21-year-old Alexander Pacto and was brought in for questioning. He confirmed that he had met Karen at the club and they had gone to his apartment on Dorchester Avenue, about 3 kilometers away. Alexander also revealed that they had been intimate. Around 4 a.m., Karen decided to leave Alexander's apartment and head home, despite his invitation to stay until morning. Alexander mentioned that during their intimate encounter, Karen accidentally hit her head on the bed corner, resulting in an injury and leaving blood marks on the sheets. The police reacted ambivalently to this information. While Alexander seemed genuinely open, he also appeared to be anticipating and justifying potential evidence that might be discovered in his apartment. On April 13th, a man reported finding a woman's purse to the police. Upon further investigation, it was revealed that the purse was discovered in the park near Alexander's residence, and it belonged to Karen. The purse contained her phone and identification documents. This new evidence lent credibility to Alexander's account of events, suggesting that something might have happened to Karen after she left his apartment. The search for Karen persisted, with hundreds of police officers thoroughly searching parks, forests, bodies of water, and abandoned buildings for any potential clues that could aid in the investigation. At that point, Alexander Pacto was the primary suspect, being the last person to have seen Karen. However, investigators kept his identity confidential and did not disclose any information about him. 2 days after Karen went missing, police entering Alexander's apartment with a search warrant, police were immediately struck by the strong smell of bleach. They also observed that the mattress on the bed was the wrong size. Small, dark red spots were discovered on the bed and in the bathroom, and samples were taken for analysis. Additionally, a toolbox and a large quantity of cleaning supplies were found in the apartment. A police dog trained to detect human remains indicated a potential find near Alexander Pacto's car. While awaiting a search warrant, detectives discovered that Alexander had taken his car to be cleaned the previous day, but the job appeared to have been done poorly. Upon searching the vehicle, investigators found small, dark red spots on the inside of the passenger door and sent samples to the lab for analysis. As the investigation progressed, suspicions mounted that Karen might not be alive, but the search for her continued unabated. After journalists uncovered the suspect's identity, a photo of Alexander Pacto appeared on the front page of a local newspaper the following day. This unexpected move by the press ultimately proved helpful to the investigation. A man recognized Alexander's photo in the newspaper and contacted the police, offering valuable information. He claimed to have worked with Alexander in the past and revealed that Alexander rented a warehouse on a farm outside Glasgow. This farm was approximately 9 kilometers from Alexander's apartment. The police pursued every lead and investigated this new information. The farm owner verified that Alexander indeed rented a storage space from him for £10 a week. Upon inspection of the storage space, the police discovered a 200-liter drum containing Karen's body, which had been dissolved in caustic soda, a highly corrosive alkaline substance capable of breaking down organic materials. They also found a bonfire with remnants of a mattress that Pacto had attempted to burn. On the same day, April 15th, the suspect in Karen Buckley's case was arrested. Faced with substantial evidence, Alexander admitted to taking Karen's life, but claimed it was in self-defense. Police reconstructed a timeline of events based on evidence and Alexander testimony. On the night of April 11th to 12th, Karen left the club around 1 a.m. The reason for her departure remains unclear. Her friends reported no argument, stating Karen said she was going to the bathroom and would return. It is also unclear why Karen left her jacket behind, even if she had decided to go home. Officers investigating the case reviewed 1,900 hours of surveillance footage. One recording showed Karen encountering Alexander after leaving a club. They walked together towards his car, where it's believed he offered to drive her home. However, once inside the car, Alexander attacked Karen. He struck her 14 times on the head with a large wrench, resulting in her death. Investigators found dark red stains in the car, bathroom, and on Alexander's bed, later confirmed as Karen's dried blood. After disposing of her body, Alexander planned his next moves, starting with getting rid of Karen's purse, which was later recovered and given to the police. Around 2 a.m., he returned home and did something that shocked the detectives. He took the Karen out of the car and carried it into his apartment. Later, at 8 a.m., he used his phone to search online for information about caustic soda. He then visited a shopping center where he purchased 6 liters of caustic soda, a respirator mask, and gloves at 9:42 a.m. To get rid of Karen's body, Alexander realized 6 liters of caustic soda wouldn't be enough. He bought more from another store on his way home and put the body in the bathtub. However, since his neighbor would return home around 8 p.m. and he wouldn't have enough time, he wrapped the body in a blanket and hid it in his bedroom. The next day, April 13th, Alexander threw a wrench into the River Clyde, later found by divers. He then visited a nearby shopping center, about 1.5 miles away, where he sought a consultant's advice on a product that could remove bloodstains from a mattress. He also purchased 2 padlocks that day. He took Karen's belongings to a farm and burned them. Then he bought a barrel and took it to a rented warehouse. There he poured in caustic soda and locked the gate with 2 new padlocks. Later that day at 6 p.m. police visited his home and took him in for questioning. Alexander confessed to his crime, but his motive was unclear. He claimed he killed Karen in self-defense during a car argument. But investigators did not believe him. They thought he was trying to justify his actions. Police suspected that Alexander killed Karen to cover up another crime and then got rid of her body. However, the body was too decomposed to determine if Karen had suffered violence before dying. In September 2015, Alexander Pacto was found guilty and given a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 23 years. Through his lawyer, he apologized to Karen's family and expressed remorse. Alexander told his lawyer that he was too drunk on the night of the incident to remember why he killed Karen. If he had not pleaded guilty, he would have been eligible for parole in 25 years instead of 23. Today we'll delve into the mysterious case of Donata Machau, a twisted cold case from 1984 that was finally solved after almost 4 decades. East Windsor is a township located in Mercer County, New Jersey. Situated in the central part of the state, it is known for its suburban character and proximity to major cities like Trenton and Princeton. East Windsor offers a blend of residential areas, commercial centers, and natural landscapes. The township is home to various parks, recreational facilities, and cultural attractions, providing residents and visitors with ample opportunities for outdoor activities and community engagement. But despite this idyllic setting, this place would become the home of a heinous crime. Donna D. Michaud's journey began on October 16, 1964, in the town of East Windsor, nestled within Mercer County. She was the cherished daughter of Betty Lou Thompson Maxshaw and Ronald Wayne Maxshaw. As the years went by, Donna's family expanded with the arrival of a younger sister, Julie Maxshaw, in 1969. Life took a turn when their mother, Betty, found love again and married a man named Garland. Together they formed a blended family. Donna and Julie embraced their new life, with her beloved stepfather by their side. Donna Michaud had a zest for life that radiated through her love for cooking and sewing. Alongside her job as a legal secretary, she harbored dreams of a career in modeling. For Julie, Donna was a shining star. Despite the challenges that came her way, Donna never lost her sparkle and continued to embrace life with open arms. Little did she know that her path would take an unexpected and tragic turn, forever altering the lives of those who cherished her. On February 25, 1984, it seemed like a typical Saturday night for 14-year-old Julie Michaud, who was relaxing at her family's home in East Windsor, when she noticed her 19-year-old sister, Donna D. Michaud's car parked outside. She joined her in the basement. Together, they spent the night watching scary movies until 2 a.m. At that point, Julie went upstairs to her bed, ready to rest for the night. Their mother Betty and stepfather Garland were peacefully asleep upstairs during that time. They were unaware of any unusual sounds or disturbances emanating from the basement. The following day, on February 26, 1984, Donna was expected to go to work at a law firm, so her absence during the day didn't initially raise alarm bells. However, as dinner time arrived and Donna still hadn't returned home, her mother began to worry. Concerned for her daughter's well-being, decided to investigate by venturing downstairs to check the basement apartment. As Betty entered Donna's usually neat and organized apartment, she was greeted by a disarray of items scattered about. It was evident that a struggle had taken place within those walls. The sight of blood-stained clothes peeped together heightened her growing unease, prompting her to immediately contact the police. Once the police arrived at the scene, they meticulously combed through the entire basement, their eyes keenly scanning for any trace that could unravel the mystery. Their diligence paid off when they discovered faint fingerprints near a table close to the bed. Recognizing the potential significance of these fingerprints, they carefully collected them as evidence. Alongside the blood-stained clothes, they also uncovered traces of bodily fluid in the bedroom, an essential clue that held the promise of leading them closer to the identity of the perpetrator and help in finding Donna. In the search for answers, investigators made a grim discovery. In March 1984, when they found Donna Michaud's abandoned blood-stained car near a sewer plant roughly a mile away from her home. However, despite this lead, the mystery surrounding her disappearance endured. Investigators meticulously combed through countless records. They diligently interviewed the residents living in the vicinity of Donna Michaud's residence, determined to unearth any clue that could lead them to the truth. As fate would have it, the investigation took a significant turn when they suspected a number of people, including Nathaniel Harvey, a former worker at a nearby farm and resident of East Windsor. He had been apprehended and detained for his alleged involvement in a series of assaults and a chilling murder in the Plainsboro area. But all the leads, including Harvey, did not pan out at that time. The significant piece of evidence, the bodily fluid that investigators found in Donna Michaud's bedroom, also went for testing. However, the technology for DNA testing was not as advanced as it is today, and the testing conducted at that time lacked the precision needed to pinpoint the source of the bodily fluid. But the investigators didn't close the case and hoped that one day they would come up with some solid leads that would help them solve Donna Michaud's murder mystery. The weight of the tragedy became too much for Donna's stepfather, who tragically passed away just 6 months after Donna vanished, leaving the family to bear the weight of their grief alone. The family went to great lengths in their search for the killer. They hired private investigators, trackers, and even sought the help of psychics. They poured all their resources into the effort, spending every last penny they had. Their hope never wavered. They held on to the belief that somehow, maybe, just maybe, their loved one was still alive. They couldn't shake the thought that perhaps she was injured. After exhausting all possible avenues to finding the identity of the killer, seeking solace and a fresh start, Julie and her mother made the difficult decision to move to Texas in 1987. However, their journey to healing was further marred by misfortune when their storage unit was burglarized, robbing them of precious memories. The thieves callously snatched away family photos, cherished mementos, and 16 boxes filled with investigation files, adding another layer of pain. 11 years went by, but there was no news. But on April 2, 1995, police officers got a call from a Boy Scout troop about a body they found near Cranberry. It was not in good condition, almost completely decomposed, but when they got the dental records back, they couldn't believe they had found the most important part of the puzzle. They had been searching for the last decade. It was the body of Donna DiMatteo, concealed within a carpet in a wooded area near a cranberry farm, not far from where her car had been recovered. After her remains were sent for an autopsy, initial findings indicated that Donna had tragically suffered a gunshot wound to the head. However, as the case investigation progressed, the dedicated experts at the Middle Assault Regional Medical Examiner's office delved deeper into her remains. Through careful examination, they discovered that her cause of death was indeed a head injury, although it couldn't be definitively determined as a gunshot wound. Nevertheless, the cause of death was amended to evidence of homicidal violence, and her death continued to be classified as a homicide. With this crucial lead unable to yield conclusive results, the investigation gradually reached a standstill, and the case eventually fell into the abyss of unsolved mysteries. In February 2022, Mercer County Prosecutor Angelo Onofre directed the reopening of the Donna Machow case. The case was handed over to the Office of Public Integrity and Accountability Central Regional Cold Case Task Force, a dedicated group within the statewide cold case network established by the New Jersey Attorney General in 2019. As part of the reopened investigation, all relevant physical evidence, including DNA samples, was carefully resubmitted to the state police's Central Regional Laboratory. This step aimed to leverage advanced forensic techniques and technology in the pursuit of truth and justice. Modern DNA technology played a crucial role in shedding new light on the case. The evidence, the bodily fluid which was found from Donna Machow's bedroom, was carefully re-examined, and it conclusively matched the DNA profile to Nathaniel Harvey. Astonishingly, his DNA was the only genetic material found in the room that should not have been present, according to the Attorney General's office. It was a breakthrough that provided clarity and closure to the long-standing mystery. Nathaniel Harvey, born in 1942 in East Windsor, had a troubled past right from the beginning. He had a knack for trouble and found himself behind bars for most of his life. In 1968, he got married, but the identity of his wife is not known. Living in East Windsor, Harvey had a long list of crimes to his name. He was also described as a daring intruder by the West Windsor police, and he had been convicted of assault. It was said that during his crimes, Harvey would sneak into unlocked homes where he would take young women hostage and commit acts of violence. The authorities always had their eyes on him, considering him a potential suspect in their search for justice. One such case was of Irene Schnaps, who was also a resident of East Windsor. During the years of 1984 and 1985, the local authorities were faced with a growing concern as a series of burglaries rattled Plainsboro, West Windsor, and nearby neighborhoods. The authorities were also grappling with the unsolved murder of Irene Schnaps and the perplexing disappearance of Donna Machow, who vanished from her family's East Windsor home. 16 months after Donna Machow's disappearance, tragedy struck again in East Windsor when Irene Schnaps, a 37-year-old woman who had recently lost her husband to cancer, was killed. The incident occurred overnight on Saturday, June 15, 1985, or in the early hours of the following day. Concerned for her well-being, one of Irene's colleagues at RCA Americom went to her apartment the next morning, June 16, 1985, on Research Way after she failed to show up for work. With trembling hands, he informed the police about the tragic scene that he had encountered. Inside the apartment, a heart-wrenching sight awaited the investigators. Irene Schnapp suffered a barrage of over 15 vicious blows to her head, inflicted by an axe or hatchet. The room bore gruesome evidence of the tragedy, with Irene's lifeless body lying on cloth in her blood-soaked bedroom. Amidst the chilling scene, a crimson-stained footprint on a pillowcase was discovered, becoming a vital clue that held the potential to unlock the mystery behind her tragic demise. Peter Stoesser, a 41-year-old man, stepped forward to share his account with the investigators. As a friendly acquaintance of Irene Schnapp's, he revealed that he may have been the last person to have seen her alive. Shortly after sharing his connection to Irene Schnapp's, Stoesser's life took an unexpected turn. The police began frequent visits to his doorstep and, one Saturday, June 17, 1985, Stillwasser found himself taken to the Middle Assault Prosecutor's office, where he spent the entire day under intense scrutiny, facing a barrage of questions regarding Irene's tragic murder. He confessed to developing feelings of attraction towards her, envisioning a potential romantic connection. However, Irene, still grieving the loss of her husband, expressed the need for time and space before considering any new relationships. As Stoesser eagerly anticipated the right moment to express his romantic feelings, he maintained a friendly connection with Irene. He extended invitations to his lively gatherings, hosting barbecues for neighbors and friends, in an effort to ensure she didn't feel alone. However, their potential relationship was abruptly shattered when Irene met her tragic end, testing suspicion upon Stoesser as the primary suspect. Law enforcement also obtained a search warrant for Stoesser's residence. During the search, they discovered a quilt that bore suspicious-looking stains, possibly blood-related. Additionally, from his car, investigators seized a pair of white work gloves and a metal strip exhibiting reddish spots. Upon conducting tests on the quilt, it was revealed to contain human blood, accompanied by hairs that seemed to match those of the victim. Stoesser, however, maintained that the stains on the quilt originated from menstrual blood belonging to another woman he was involved with. As the investigation progressed, Stoesser underwent a lie detector test, which he did not pass, although the results of such tests were not considered admissible in court. Additionally, it came to light that he had a history of serving time in jail for stalking a former girlfriend. However, the police eventually eliminated Stoesser as a primary suspect, largely due to a significant discrepancy in shoe sizes. Stoesser wore size 12 shoes, whereas a bloody footprint at the crime scene indicated a size 6 shoe. This unexpected mismatch in foot size shifted the focus of the investigation elsewhere. However, on October 28, 1985, the breakthrough in the case occurred. On that very day, Nathaniel Harvey embarked on a rampage through the southern part of West Windsor, ultimately leading to a significant turning point in the investigation. The initial call that reached the dispatch center reported an alarming incident in Dutch Neck Estates. It was a chilling account of a 13-year-old girl who had narrowly escaped an attempted abduction from her own home, and the man covered her mouth in an attempt to take her away. However, her bravery prevailed as she managed to free herself and let out a piercing scream, alerting her parents to the danger. Startled by the commotion, he fled the scene. After fleeing the home in Dutch Neck Estates, that man broke into another house, probably to hide from the police. He was confronted by the homeowner. He turned on the light and saw Nathaniel Harvey standing there threatening him with an axe. Sensing the imminent danger, Harvey swiftly pivoted, shattering the glass door with the powerful swing of the axe, and ran off into the woods. With the chilling affinity for axes, Harvey had developed a disturbing pattern of wielding these menacing tools to instill fear in his victims. Even when armed with a knife during one of the assaults he committed, he deceitfully claimed to possess an axe, further fueling the terror. It wasn't lost on the astute law enforcement officials that the murder weapon used in the Irene Schnapp's killing was believed to be an axe, adding another haunting connection to Harvey's modus operandi. A short time later, investigators diligently canvassed the area, and their sharp eyes caught sight of Harvey traversing a soybean field and then ran off into the woods. The police swiftly descended upon the scene, converging on Harvey's location near the Princeton Arms shopping center. It was there at the intersection of Old Trenton Road and Dorchester Drive that a state trooper apprehended Harvey. During questioning, police learned of the extent of Harvey's one-man crime spree, confessed to a string of burglaries that had struck fear into the community. However, the extent of his depravity became even more harrowing as it revealed the details of a recent assault. Prior to the tragic murder of Irene, Harvey had abducted a young girl from East Windsor, forcefully taking her to an abandoned building nestled along Dutch Neck Road. He revealed that the victim, who was actually Donna Michaud, innocently stepped out onto her deck to indulge in a cigarette, only to be seized by his relentless grip. After Harvey's arrest, the 13-year-old girl was called to identify if Harvey was the man who attacked her on October 28, 1985. Through her courageous testimony, she ultimately identified Harvey as her assailant. The authorities made a difficult decision not to pursue charges in the case due to the extremely brutal and perverse nature of the attack, considering the potential impact it would have on the victim's well-being. However, a breakthrough came when investigators finally received a search warrant and conducted a thorough search of Harvey's car in November 1985, which was located in the Princeton Arms apartment complex. Inside, they uncovered compelling evidence, directly linking him to the Irene Schnapp's murder. Alongside stolen items from various recent burglaries, a significant discovery was made. A Seiko watch that was positively identified as belonging to Irene and having been taken from her apartment at the time of the tragic murder. This crucial find provided a solid connection between Harvey and the crime. In an intriguing twist, it was discovered that Harvey's wife resided in the same apartment complex as Irene. However, this information had to be kept confidential due to his wife's reliance on state assistance. Additionally, authorities asserted that Harvey initially admitted to the murder of Irene during his questioning at the West Windsor Police Headquarters, where he was confronted with various matters. It was during this intense moment that Harvey requested to speak with his father, who offered him crucial advice to do the right thing. In a surprising turn of events, Harvey then made a confession regarding the Irene Schnapp's murder. Following Harvey's apprehension, the quilt that had been seized from Stoesser, the neighbor of Irene, who was also seen as a person of interest in the murder, was returned to him. Additionally, the glove and metal strip, confiscated from his car, underwent testing by prosecutors, revealing negative results for the presence of blood. In 1986, Harvey was convicted for the murder of Irene Schnapp. However, for years later in 1990, the state Supreme Court overturned his conviction, stating that his confession had been obtained without properly informing him of his Miranda rights. Harvey, who now maintained that his confession was coerced, immediately retracted his statement. This turn of events raised concerns about the validity of his initial confession and ignited a debate about whether he should have been reminded of his Miranda rights after speaking with his father. The question of Harvey's confession became a point of contention as conflicting accounts emerged. According to Avit Kleiner, the attorney of Harvey, he denied confessing to the murder of Irene, contradicting the police's assertion that he had admitted to the crime, even though the confession was not recorded. The initial conviction was overturned based on the court's ruling that Harvey should have been reminded of his Miranda rights after requesting to speak to his father during questioning. In 1994, as the case went to a second trial, the focus shifted to the crucial evidence of blood found at the crime scene. The prosecution presented DNA evidence that revealed genetic traits matching both Harvey's blood sample and the stains on a box spring in Irene Schnapp's apartment. The DNA testing, although still in its early stages, indicated that Harvey could not be ruled out as a contributor. To further strengthen their case, prosecution experts utilized dot intensity analysis, a technique that estimated the consistency between the blood characteristics found at the scene and Harvey's DNA. They determined that such a match would occur in only 1 out of every 1,400 African American individuals. However, the defense experts countered, arguing that the ratio could potentially be as low as 1 in 50. This time Harvey was convicted and received the death sentence. However, this verdict was upheld by a divided state Supreme Court in 1997, with some justices expressing differing views. Justice Alan B. Handler, in his dissenting opinion, carefully scrutinized the 64-page analysis of the DNA presented in the case. He voiced his doubts and expressed confidence that at some point in the future, either the state or federal court would likely reverse the decision. In a surprising turn of events, according to an article in the New York Times on May 15, 2005, Kleiner, the attorney of Harvey, pointed a finger of accusation at Peter Stowesser, a former neighbor of Irene. Although Stowesser was once considered a possible suspect by the police, he was subsequently ruled out. Kleiner implicated Stowesser, who was now 61 years old and residing in Hightstown, in both the Irene case and the murder of Donna Machow from East Windsor, who went missing in 1984 and whose body was discovered in 1995. These claims made by Kleiner garnered significant attention, making headlines in the New Jersey section of the Sunday New York Times. He also strongly disputed the accuracy of the blood DNA evidence presented during Harvey's second trial, claiming it to be flawed and contaminated. Additionally, he demanded further DNA testing on other pieces of evidence collected in the case, suggesting that they could have implicated Stowesser instead. Kleiner raised concerns about missing evidence, including the absence of hair from the quilt. He expressed suspicion regarding the classification of the retrieved hair, noting that it was initially labeled as Caucasian and later had the phrase "and one necroid hair." Kleiner alleged that all the hair evidence, technician's notes, and microfilm have mysteriously vanished, leading him to believe that the hair evidence never actually existed. Capsack, who continued to serve as a prosecutor in Middle Assault County, expressed unwavering confidence in Harvey's conviction, firmly asserting that Stowesser played no part in the crime. According to Capsack, Stowesser was initially considered as a possible suspect in the case, but he was ultimately eliminated as a prime suspect. The decisive factor was the discovery of a size 6 bloody sneaker print on the victim's pillow, which contradicted Stowesser's size 12 foot. Interestingly, the article failed to mention that Harvey himself wore a size 6 sneaker. However, he clarified that Stowesser's involvement was merely circumstantial and not indicative of his guilt. In April 2007, Judge John F. Malone of the State Superior Court made a decision that dashed Harvey's hopes for a new evidentiary hearing and dismissed his habeas corpus challenge. He overturned Harvey's 1994 conviction, originally a death sentence, due to inadequate legal assistance provided to him during the early 1990s. Despite this development, Harvey, 65 years old, would still serve a 70-year sentence for a separate charge. The death sentence he received in 1994 had been reduced to life in prison without parole when New Jersey abolished capital punishment in 2007. Prior to this abolition, Harvey had spent 20 years on death row, although the state had not carried out an execution since 1963. However, late November 2020, Harvey died in the State Woods State Prison in Bridgeton, which eventually closed all the doors of any further investigation. Peter Stowesser was considered a suspect in the murder of Donna Machow. The remains of Machow were found in 1995, approximately a mile away from the location of the Irene crime scene. It was claimed that Machow and Stowesser were both enrolled in classes at Mercer County College during the fall of 1983. It was pointed out that after Machow went missing, Stowesser did not attend the spring session classes that he had previously registered for. However, Stowesser maintains that although he attended Mercer County College, he had no knowledge of Machow or any connection to her. Harvey also was connected to Donna Machow, as the discovery of Donna's remains was in a wooded area near the farm where Harvey had briefly been employed, which raised suspicion. Adding to the puzzle was the finding of her abandoned car near a sewer plant, conveniently within walking distance of Harvey's residence. These curious circumstances were enough for authorities to focus their attention on Harvey, exploring the possibility of his involvement in the case. Finally, in the last week of April 2023, New Jersey Attorney General Matthew J. Platkin announced that the conclusive identification as the person responsible for the assault and murder of Donna Machow. The state's Attorney General said the case was finally cracked when investigators took a fresh look at this decades-old mystery. Colonel Patrick Callahan, superintendent of the New Jersey State Police, said that as 4 decades have passed, the memory of a young life, cruelly taken away, still lingers, haunting the hearts of those who loved her. The predator responsible callously discarded her remains in a shallow grave, leaving them undisturbed for over a decade. However, time cannot extinguish the burning desire for justice. Even though the perpetrator met his fate behind bars, serving time for another heinous crime, and ultimately passing away in 2020, it does not diminish the significance of this long-awaited resolution. We commend the relentless efforts of the Central Regional Cold Case Task Force and the dedicated state police forensic scientists, who hopefully have brought a modicum of solace to the victim's grieving family after all these years. The determination and dedication of law enforcement and forensic experts serve as a reminder that the pursuit of justice knows no time limit. The case of Lisa Valdez. Lisa Valdez was born on September 6, 1961, in San Francisco, California. She grew up with her mother and brother. Lisa and her mother had an exceptionally close relationship, rarely arguing. As a teenager, Lisa developed a passion for dance and an interest in modern technology. She was an early adopter of emerging technologies, including email, which was still a novelty at the time. This interest in technology would later shape her career path. After graduating from college, Lisa found a job as a software analyst in San Francisco. Her mother then used her savings to buy Lisa an apartment in a desirable neighborhood. Lisa lived alone in the apartment, progressing her career and spending time with her family whenever possible. She also continued to pursue her passion for dance. On May 16, 1998, Lisa, then 36, hosted her mother and some family friends at her apartment for the evening. After the guests departed, her mother helped with the dishes before heading home. Before leaving, Lisa promised to call her mother the next day, but the call never came. Initially, her mother assumed Lisa was simply busy. Since Lisa had dance practice scheduled for the next day, her mother decided to wait. However, the entire day passed without any word from Lisa. After trying unsuccessfully to contact Lisa for several days, Lisa's mother began to worry. When Lisa did not show up for work on Monday, her coworkers called her mother to express their concern. The mother immediately decided to go to Lisa's apartment complex. When Lisa's mother arrived at her home, she saw a group of police officers. Lisa's mother approached the police to ask what was going on and was told that residents had reported a strange smell coming from one of the apartments. The apartment manager investigated, found the door unlocked, and called the police after discovering a body on the floor. Police quickly identified the victim as Lisa. Her body showed signs of trauma, making it clear she had been murdered. The advanced state of decomposition suggested that Lisa had been dead for several days. The police suspected that Lisa had been assaulted due to the presence of her underwear next to her body. The crime scene was marked by extensive blood stains on the floor and bed, with the TV and air conditioner still on. However, the disarray of the apartment was later found to be consistent with Lisa's usual living habits. There was no indication of a robbery, as all of Lisa's valuables, including jewelry, were left untouched. The only missing items were her keys and a gym bag. A peculiar detail was the discovery that the attacker had cut off some of Lisa's hair and taken it with them. Detectives believed that the killer may have known Lisa personally. This theory was supported by the lack of forced entry into the apartment complex, which was secured by a fence and required a key or resident approval for access. Police investigating Lisa's murder began by interviewing her neighbors. Their first lead came when a neighbor mentioned discovering a bent metal door frame and faint bloodstains on her door 2 days before Lisa's body was discovered. The neighbor had previously reported the incident to the building's management, but they had not notified the police. Police are certain that Lisa's murder was linked to a break-in at her neighbor's apartment. It is possible that the person trying to break into her neighbor's apartment was seen by Lisa and killed her, but another theory is that the break-in may have occurred after Lisa was murdered. Police also interviewed the person who cleaned Lisa's apartment weekly. She said that 2 days before Lisa's body was found, she tried to open the apartment door with her key but found it locked from the inside. When she looked through the door, she saw a naked woman lying on the floor and a male voice talking. Assuming it was a private situation, the cleaner quickly left without doing anything. Police suspected Lisa was dead when the cleaner heard a man's voice, and it was her killer who was still in the apartment. The cleaner also reported seeing a black Ziploc bag near the body. An envelope containing cash was found taped to the inside of Lisa's apartment door. The money was for the cleaner, as Lisa always left it with her the day before cleaning. The presence of the envelope suggests that Lisa was likely attacked after her mother left, sometime between midnight and early morning. Neighbors who lived downstairs reported hearing a loud noise coming from upstairs on the night of the attack, followed by someone coming down the stairs. Although they did not see who it was, the neighbors' accounts provided a timeline of events. Police continued to search Lisa's apartment for clues, while medical professionals examined her body. Forensic analysis revealed that a fingerprint on the toilet seat did not belong to Lisa. In an attempt to identify the fingerprint, the police collected fingerprints from all of Lisa's friends and family members, but none of them matched the mystery fingerprint. Detectives therefore suspected that the mystery fingerprint might belong to Lisa's killer. Medical examiners released their report, shedding new light on the case. Lisa's body showed more than 20 stab wounds, but the advanced decomposition made it difficult to determine if she had been sexually assaulted. The medical team also discovered skin particles under Lisa's nails, which were likely to have come from her attacker, and sent them to the lab for analysis. One of the pillowcases showed multiple bloodstains, which upon analysis were found to be a mixture of Lisa's blood and another person's. The police sent the bloodstains to the laboratory for further testing. Police believe the killer may have accidentally injured himself when stabbing Lisa. At the scene, they discovered 2 bandages from a first aid kit in the toilet, which the killer may have used to bandage his wound. Additionally, the killer may have left fingerprints on the toilet seat when discarding the bandages. DNA analysis revealed that the blood on the pillowcase belonged to a man whose DNA was not in the FBI database. Furthermore, the skin particles found under Lisa's fingernails and the blood on her knee were from the same person. Although the DNA did not match anyone in the database, detectives now had a DNA profile of the killer. Police compared the DNA evidence with samples from criminals in the area. They also began to scrutinize Lisa's acquaintances. Lisa's mother mentioned that Lisa had met a man named Albert Ketto and that they had planned to go on a date the day after the murder. However, Albert Ketto had canceled their plans just days before. Police brought Albert Ketto in for questioning and noticed a large cut on his hand. Police considered Albert Ketto a potential suspect. However, Albert Ketto denied any involvement in the crime. Police collected Albert Ketto's fingerprints and DNA samples for further analysis. However, the test results showed that none of Albert Ketto's samples matched the blood found on the pillowcase. Additionally, the skin particles under Lisa's fingernails belonged to someone else. This new information led investigators to expand their search for other suspects. Police decided to look at messages left on Lisa's answering machine in the days before she was killed. Police compiled a list of 40 callers but discovered one unusual message. It came from a man who had called Lisa just hours before the murder. He left a message saying, "You know how it goes. Hey Lisa, are you home?" When police played the message to Lisa's friend, the friend recognized the voice as Albert Robinson, a co-worker of Lisa's. Lisa and Albert Robinson worked together. However, Albert Robinson had expressed romantic feelings for Lisa, but she did not return his feelings. Albert Robinson appeared at Lisa's memorial service a few days after the murder. Albert Robinson claimed that he and Lisa were in love, saying that they planned to get married and start a family. However, Lisa's friends and mother objected to this. Lisa told them that she had no feelings for Albert Robinson and that the relationship between the two was just friends. During questioning, Albert Robinson denied any involvement in Lisa's murder, claiming that he loved Lisa and would never hurt her. However, he refused to provide DNA and fingerprint samples to the police, which aroused suspicion and made him the prime suspect. Police obtained a search warrant for Albert Robinson's home, where they discovered something unusual. Albert Robinson's home contained many photos of Lisa. However, despite the evidence, he continued to deny his involvement. He cooperated by providing his fingerprints and DNA samples to the police. However, they were surprised when Albert Robinson's test results did not match the samples collected at Lisa's apartment. Police eliminated Albert Robinson as a suspect. Due to lack of evidence, the case remained unsolved for many years. The investigation continues, with police waiting for the suspect's DNA or fingerprints to be matched in a database. Over the years, Lisa's mother has used social media platforms to plead for information, but the police have yet to uncover any new clues, leaving the case even more unsolved. In 2010, the FBI used new DNA technology to identify suspects by matching their DNA to relatives in a database. This method was limited to close relatives. On September 2nd, police received a call from the FBI with the news. Although the FBI did not compare the DNA to possible relatives in the database, they did retest the original DNA sample as part of the process. Amazingly, 13 years after the murder, the retested DNA sample was a perfect match. DNA from blood and skin particles found under Lisa's fingernails matched a 52-year-old man named Anthony Hughes, whose DNA had recently been added to the FBI database. Although Anthony had a lengthy criminal record, his DNA was not in the database because he had committed a minor crime. However, a change in California law requires DNA samples from all convicted felons, regardless of the severity of their crimes. As a result, Anthony's DNA was collected after he was arrested for petty theft. The investigation revealed that Anthony's fingerprints were also on file matched those found on the toilet seat in Lisa's apartment. Experts were able to identify the specific finger that left the fingerprint. Prior to the arrest, police searched for additional evidence that linked Anthony to the crime. 13 years ago, police reviewed calls to Lisa's phone before she was killed, but they ignored calls made after her death. Recently, police discovered a call made by Anthony to Lisa's phone just one day after her death. He left a message, the content of which seemed normal and did not arouse any suspicion at the time. If the police had investigated Anthony at that time, they would have found his extensive criminal record. When they went through Lisa's belongings, detectives found Anthony's phone number in her address book, indicating that she knew him. After talking to Lisa's friends, the police learned that Lisa had dated Anthony in high school. The police now had all the information they needed to question Anthony. Since Anthony was homeless at the time and had no fixed address, the police approached cautiously to avoid Anthony fleeing. They arrested him under the pretext of investigating a series of robberies in San Francisco, and he surrendered without resistance. Police began asking about a series of robberies, gradually bringing up Anthony's previous convictions. Eventually, police asked him if he knew a woman named Lisa Valdez. He initially denied knowing her, but when shown a photo, he admitted that they had been high school acquaintances. Anthony also claimed that he had not seen Lisa since the late 1980s. The police pressed Anthony for information about his relationship with Lisa. Eventually, the police produced evidence of his DNA found in Lisa's apartment in 1998. Upon hearing this, Anthony burst into tears. Anthony was restrained as he cried and screamed. He was eventually charged with murder, and detectives informed Lisa's family that her killer had been arrested. However, the trial did not begin until 4 years later. During the trial, Anthony initially appeared confident, but as the trial progressed, his pace changed. He began appearing in court with a Bible and wearing a cross. Anthony's lawyer argued that his client was incapable of committing the murder due to a medical condition that weakened his muscles, making movement extremely difficult. Despite the defense's argument, the prosecution presented strong evidence linking Anthony to the crime scene. This included his skin cells found under the Lisa's fingernails, his blood on a pillowcase, and his fingerprint on the toilet seat. Anthony maintained his innocence, claiming he had not seen the Lisa since the late 1980s. The prosecution, on the other hand, proposed a different scenario. They believed Anthony had contacted the Lisa, visited her home, and attempted to engage in intimate relations with her. When she refused, he became enraged and killed her. As part of the crime, he cut off a portion of her hair and took it with him before fleeing the scene. Ultimately, the jury delivered a unanimous verdict, finding Anthony guilty of first-degree murder. However, the prosecution faced challenges in securing a conviction for sexual assault due to the advanced state of the Lisa's decomposition, which made it difficult to gather sufficient evidence. The charges were reduced from first-degree murder to second-degree murder, which carries a lighter sentence. Anthony was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 16 years. Anthony has been in prison since then and continues to maintain his innocence. Anthony will be eligible for parole in 2031 at age 72. However, Anthony's chances of being paroled are slim, as parole boards typically view refusal to plead guilty as a lack of remorse. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. Wellington, Florida was known as a village where people who wanted to escape the crime in Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and West Palm Beach moved to. Wellington had a variety of events and celebrations throughout the year. The Winter Equestrian Festival was a famous event that ran from January to April and attracted equestrian enthusiasts from around the world. It featured various competitions and shows. The Wellington Bacon and Bourbon Fest was another well-attended event that offered bacon-based dishes and bourbon tastings from various vendors. A lot of famous people like Bruce Springsteen and Madonna used to visit a nearby club called Mar-a-Lago. The town itself is a very nice place with good schools, and people feel safe and happy there. In terms of safety and crime rates, Wellington has been reported to be a relatively peaceful and safe community. According to many surveys, Wellington's crime rate was lower than the national average, and it has been listed as one of the safest cities in Florida. But on Memorial Day weekend in May 1990, while everyone else was enjoying parades, barbecues, and picnics, something terrible happened to the Warren family. Marlene Warren was born on April 15, 1950. She grew up in Michigan and loved spending time with her sisters on her grandfather's farm. She enjoyed baking, making art, and painting, especially clowns. The whole family shared her love for clowns, and her parents even had a room dedicated to them. Marlene had her first child in 1965, at the tender age of 15, and named him after her husband, John Arranes. Later, in 1969, she had another child named Joey. Sadly, Marlene became a single mother of two after her first husband, John Arranes, died in a car accident. She later married Mike, or Michael Warren, in 1972. Michael Warren was just 19 and younger than 22-year-old Marlene. They moved from Michigan to South Florida, where Michael's family lived. Michael got a job as a meat inspector, but they also started investing in rental properties, which eventually brought in a lot of money. Marlene managed the rental properties, and Michael quit his job to open a used car lot called Bargain Motors. He sold cars to people who had no credit and couldn't buy them elsewhere. In the late 1980s, Mike and Marlene bought their dream home in Wellington, Florida. However, in 1983, Michael was arrested for tampering with the odometers on his used cars. He pleaded guilty and received probation, but kept his business for a few more years. Mike and Marlene led separate lives, with Mike focused on his business and spending time at the racetrack, while Marlene managed their rental properties. In 1988, tragedy struck again when Marlene's oldest son, John Jr., died in a car accident at just 22 years old. His death caused tension in Michael and Marlene's relationship. During this time, Michael Warren met Sheila King, the wife of one of his employees, Richard Spudkeen. There was an instant connection between Michael and Sheila. However, initially they kept their relationship a secret, even though it was obvious to those around them. On a rainy Saturday morning of May 26, 1990, Michael went to the racetrack while 40-year-old Marlene stayed at home. She was cooking breakfast for her son, 21-year-old Joey, who had some of his friends over. At around 10:45 a.m., there was a knock on the door. When Marlene opened it, she saw a clown holding flowers and balloons, and she assumed it was a gift. She was pretty excited to see a clown at her door, having loved them ever since she was a child. But behind the balloons and the clown costume, the clown held a gun. The clown pulled out the gun and shot her in the face. Joey heard the gunshot, ran to the door, and saw the clown driving away in a Chrysler LeBaron. Marlene was dying on the ground, and a neighbor named Bill Kramer had heard the shot too. Some people ran out, saying that someone had shot Joey's mother. An ambulance was called and Marlene was taken to the hospital, but she died 2 days later on May 28, 1990. Marlene was an outstanding human. Friendly, loving, kind, always courteous, and always respectful. But her end was unfortunate. After Marlene's shooting, saw a clown walking away, but all he could remember was that the clown had brown eyes. Initially, Joey's description to the police was vague, saying the suspect had broad shoulders and big hands. However, he did see the clown drive away in a white Chrysler LeBaron, which was a crucial detail. At first, Michael Warren was a suspect, but he had an alibi as he was at the racetrack. As a result, the police turned their attention to his girlfriend, Sheila Keene, and the more they investigated, the more evidence pointed toward her involvement. There were allegations of an affair between Michael Warren and Sheila Keene at the time of the crime. Michael vehemently denied these. However, investigators were scrutinizing their relationship to identify the motive and opportunity for Marlene's murder. Sheila also went by Sheila Sheltra, her maiden name, and had a criminal record dating back to her upbringing in Central Florida. Sheila was known to be headstrong, some say wild and very attractive. Her long hair was often described as similar to Crystal Gale's. Sheila had a criminal record from a young age, including a shoplifting charge and a theft charge a few years later. Her mugshot showed her smiling, seemingly unbothered by the arrest. People who knew her revealed that Sheila had associated herself with older men and bad influences from a young age. She was married to Richard Spud Keene, a former Ku Klux Klan member who had served time for drug trafficking. Richard was 20 years older than Sheila. Sheila even moved to Georgia to be close to him while he was in prison. After Sheila's husband was released from prison in Georgia, they moved back to Florida, where Richard started working with Michael Warren. Soon the three ex-felons began to spend a lot of time together, engaging in sketchy activities. One such incident involved Sheila dressing up as a prostitute to meet someone who had purchased a car in a motel room. While she was in there, Richard and Michael, who were armed, repossessed the car. Sheila was also spotted holding the buyer at gunpoint, and the trio fled the scene. As time passed, Michael and Sheila grew closer, and Richard faded into the background. Sheila rented an apartment in Pine Ridge, and the residents assumed that she was married to Michael because of the amount of time he spent there. Co-workers of Michael and Sheila told investigators that they believed the two were having an affair. They would go out for long lunches and were very affectionate towards each other. There was substantial evidence suggesting that they were indeed having an affair. Police records quoted Michael's mother recalling an incident where she accompanied Michael on one of his racetrack outings. She sensed something between Michael and Sheila and asked her if she loved him. Sheila confirmed that she did, but Michael responded by saying that he loved himself. During this period, Michael's marriage with Marlene was falling apart. An employee at the car dealership claimed that Michael would come in, furious after fighting with Marlene, and offer $10,000 to anyone who would kill her. There are also reports of Michael saying that he would make someone rich if they got rid of his wife, and they would never have to work again. After Marlene's murder, both Michael and Sheila became suspects in the case. While Michael was the obvious suspect, investigators started to question whether his girlfriend could have committed the crime. The nature of the murder raised suspicions, as most men would shoot their victims in the heart, not in the face. As investigators delved deeper into the case, the evidence started to point towards Sheila instead of Michael, leading them to believe that she might have a motive to commit the crime. In the investigation, finding the white Chrysler LeBaron that Joey saw became the top priority for the police. They learned that a couple had rented the car from a nearby car lot called Payless Cars. When it was time to return the car, they got confused and dialed the wrong number from an ad in the phone book. The ad was taken out by Michael Warren for his car lot, Bargain Motors, and the number listed was his, but the ad that Michael put out looked very similar to that of an ad for the Payless car lot. The couple called the number thinking it was for Payless Cars, and someone at Michael's car lot instructed them to leave the car outside the gate with the keys in the windshield wipers. However, the car was stolen shortly after. On the day of Marlene's funeral, investigators located a Chrysler LeBaron in a Winn-Dixie parking lot approximately 5 miles away from the crime scene. A number of hairs were discovered inside the car, some of which appeared to be from an acrylic wig with orange and yellow fibers. However, the DNA technology at that time was insufficient to identify precisely what the fibers were, as well as the hair samples. In addition to the car, investigators also found the place where the suspect bought the clown costume, balloons, and flowers. 2 women who worked at the Spotlight Capezio costume shop told police that a woman came in a few days before the murder and requested a clown costume, specifically Ruby's clown costume, an Afro clown wig, Bob Kelly clown makeup, and a sponge nose. Initially, the shop workers asked the woman to return the next day as they were closed, but the woman insisted on purchasing the costume that night. She was described as around 5 feet 8 inches, with brown eyes, long chocolate hair, and wearing jeans and a men's work shirt. The police reported that the shop workers identified Sheila from a photo lineup, stating that she was the woman who came to the store a few days before the murder at closing time. Sheila's potential involvement in Marlene's murder continued to be investigated, and more evidence started to pile up against her. One piece of evidence came from a nearby public supermarket, where the specific type of mylar balloons used by the clown were sold. An employee there identified a woman with long brown hair who bought those balloons just an hour and a half before the murder. And that employee was also able to identify Sheila from photos. Further adding to the suspicion was the fact that Sheila had previously dressed up as a clown. During her marriage to Richard Keene, the couple lived in a trailer park in Pahokee on the edge of Lake Okeechobee. Sheila had become friendly with people around town, including some employees at an auto parts store. On one occasion, she had even dressed up as a clown to entertain them. Despite this mounting evidence, prosecutors didn't feel they had enough to make an arrest. In 1991, about a year later, the investigation heated up as Michael and Sheila became the prime suspects. In an attempt to clear his name, Michael went on a radio show accompanied by Joey. During the interview, Michael denied any involvement in the murder and Joey defended Sheila, who he was surprised was even a suspect. Despite Joey's initial belief that the clown was a man due to its large size, evidence was beginning to point toward a woman. Michael had an alibi that confirmed he was at the racetracks during the time of the murder, leaving Sheila as the primary suspect. However, just when it seemed like the case was going nowhere, a twist emerged. Backtracking in time, in 1987, when Joey was around 18 years old, he was charged with attempted murder. The Warren family hired Christopher DeSantos as their lawyer. After a successful hearing at the courthouse, DeSantos and Michael Warren were walking out celebrating Joey's trial win. Then, Michael casually asked whether someone who hired a hitman to kill their wife would still be able to inherit their estate. The lawyer was taken aback, but answered that the law prohibited a murderer from inheriting, except in cases of manslaughter, or if the murderer was someone else. DeSantos, unfortunately, gave another example that he later regretted. He said that if someone wore a clown suit, their identity would be hidden, making it difficult to get a conviction. He didn't intend to advise Michael to wear a clown suit, but the point was that if identity couldn't be proven, then there could be no conviction. Essentially, DeSantos had given him a recipe for murder. As the investigation into Marlene's murder progressed and suspicions fell on Michael and Sheila, the investigators interviewed DeSantos too because they thought that maybe the clown figure was taking revenge on Joey and his friends. But then this interaction between DeSantos and Michael became a significant piece of evidence. It raised the question of whether Michael had taken the lawyer's advice to heart and used a clown suit to conceal his identity while committing the crime. As the investigation continued, it became clear that Marlene had expressed fear of her husband prior to her murder. She had told people that she wanted to divorce Mike, but was scared he would kill her. This, coupled with DeSantos' statement, suggested that Mike had knowledge of how he could inherit property after killing his wife. Despite this, there were no arrests made in the weeks following these revelations, as investigators needed concrete evidence to proceed. The case remained unsolved as the months dragged on. Despite not acknowledging any romantic involvement, Michael and Sheila's co-workers had their suspicions. A year after Marlene's death, they let their guard down and took a vacation together to the Bahamas. At a fancy hotel resort casino, other couples noticed them come in. Sheila appeared uneasy, while Michael was himself loud and brash. This tipped off the police yet again. Meanwhile, Michael decided to make another appearance on a radio show. And in that radio show, Michael said that he had last spoke to Sheila a month ago, when, in reality, Sheila was with Michael all the time. After Michael's radio appearance, investigators began to focus on him as a suspect in his wife's murder. They searched his business and obtained a warrant to go through his records. Michael had a history of odometer tampering, and investigators found that he had been doing the same thing at his car lot. They charged him with multiple crimes, including racketeering, odometer tapping, fraud, and theft. Although Michael was sentenced to 9 years in prison, there was still no concrete evidence linking him or Sheila to Marlene's murder. The investigation seemed to a dead end, but in 1997, new evidence emerged that would bring the case back to life. In 1997, a man contacted the police with a lead linking Michael Warren to his wife's murder. The informant was the son of an employee at Bargain Motors who had recently died, and the informant claimed that his father had made a shocking confession to him on his deathbed. According to the informant, his father told him that all the answers to the case could be found by pulling up a vehicle that was submerged in water. He even gave the exact location of the vehicle and claimed to know who planned the murder and where the gun and clown costume were hidden. This was a major lead, and investigators believed that they could finally solve the case by recovering the murder weapon and costume. Divers were sent down to the location and they found the vehicle. But unfortunately, there was nothing of significance inside it. This setback sent the investigation back to square one, and the case again remained cold for some time. In 2002, Michael Warren and Sheila Keene decided to get married in Las Vegas. As the investigation into Marlene Warren's death had come to a halt, the case remained unsolved, but Marlene's parents were convinced that Sheila was the killer clown. However, in 2013, the case was reopened, and Sheila was once again a prime suspect, particularly due to her marriage to Michael. The Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office received a grant to investigate cold cases, including the Wellington clown murder. They formed a task force with members from the state attorney's office and the FBI. Review the evidence and interview witnesses. The task force submitted new evidence for DNA analysis, which helped them get the indictment. This included DNA samples from different people who were suspects in the case, including Michael and Sheila. It also included the possible DNA samples found in the clown wig and other hair strands that were inside the Chrysler LeBaron. The evidence gathered from interviews and analysis allowed investigators to take a fresh look at the case. Mike and Sheila had started a new life in Abington, a small town in Virginia, where they had reinvented themselves. Sheila had even changed her name to Debbie, and they were living a seemingly happy life, with neighbors describing them as friendly and in love. They had even opened up a popular fast food restaurant called the Purple Cow in Tennessee, just across the border. Investigators eventually tracked down Michael and Sheila at their restaurant. Despite being prime suspects, they were not on the run or trying to hide, and they were still working and living their lives openly. It seemed that they had finally moved on from their past and were doing well. Although Michael Warren was generally described as a laid-back and happy individual, not everyone had a favorable impression of him, especially after an encounter with one of his neighbors that showed another side of him. Apparently, Michael decided to take some rocks from his neighbor's property without permission. But when confronted about it, he suggested that they should be neighborly about the situation. The neighbor replied that the neighborly thing to do would have been to ask for permission first. Michael then responded with insults, calling the neighbor scrawny and using a derogatory term. The neighbor stood his ground and called Michael a bully. As Michael and Sheila lived their seemingly idyllic life in Abingdon, Virginia, a dark secret lingered in the shadows. One night during a party, a drunken Sheila, known to her co-workers as Debbie, revealed a chilling tale of how she had gotten away with murder in Florida. Meanwhile in Florida, detectives relentlessly pursued the case, utilizing the latest DNA technology to uncover a potential suspect in the murder of Marlene Warren. The evidence pointed to one person, the very same Sheila Keene Warren, or Debbie, who had casually shared her deadly secret with her unsuspecting colleagues. On December 26, 2017, Mike and Sheila were driving back to their hometown of Abington from Vermont in their Cadillac SUV. When they were pulled over by the police, Sheila was arrested but didn't ask why. Instead, she asked if her husband was also being arrested. The reason for her arrest, Sheila had been indicted for first-degree murder with a firearm, the same crime that had been unsolved for 27 years. Despite being a prime suspect from the beginning of the investigation, Sheila had managed to evade arrest until that day. Now she faced the potential penalty of life in prison. As Sheila was being brought into the police station, a video captured the moment, followed by a mugshot. In the mugshot, she is seen smiling, reminiscent of her teenage mugshot when she was first arrested. The contrast between the heinousness of the crime she was being accused of and the nonchalant expression on her face was unsettling. Sheila Keene Warren's lawyer stated that she strongly denied any involvement in the murder. During her time in prison, she wrote numerous letters that showed her belief in her own innocence. Despite the passage of 27 years and the initial description of the clown being that of a man, the state of Florida was confident that they would secure a conviction, even though the murder weapon was still missing. Sheila had been awaiting trial in jail after her arrest in 2017, while investigators continued to build their case against her. Finally, on April 25, 2023, 59-year-old Sheila pleaded guilty to the crime of dressing up as a clown and shooting Marlene Warren. Although her lawyer still maintained her innocence, he believed that her guilty plea helped her case. If the jury had found her guilty, she could have faced a minimum sentence of 25 years in prison. However, by pleading guilty, she received a reduced sentence of only 12 years. Remarkably, her lawyer even suggested that Sheila could be released as early as 2024 due to her good behavior in prison. With Sheila's confession, the investigators finally solved the case. But do you think that Sheila meant her confession? Or was she just really looking for a deal to cut her sentence? The case of Jessica Dishin. Jessica Dishin was born on May 2, 1982, in the small town of Shepherdsville, Kentucky. As the eldest of 3 children, Jessica took on significant responsibilities from a young age, helping her parents care for her 2 younger brothers while they worked. At age 15, Jessica started working part-time at a restaurant to save money to buy her first car, a red Pontiac. A few years later, she bought the car she wanted. Despite her job, Jessica excelled in school and began planning to attend college, where she hoped to study accounting. In the fall of 1999, 17-year-old Jessica was about to start her senior year of high school. She had also started dating a boy, which made her very happy. On the morning of Friday, September 10th, Jessica's parents went to work, and her younger brothers caught the bus to school. However, Jessica did not leave for school as planned. Later that day, around noon, Jessica's mother returned home from work and noticed something unusual. Jessica's car was still parked in front of the house. The mother went to Jessica's room, thinking that maybe she had overslept and missed school. But Jessica was not in her bedroom. The mother then considered the possibility that Jessica might have gotten a ride to school from her father, so she called him to ask. However, he told her that he had gone to work alone that morning. Jessica's mother suspected something was wrong with her car, so she took out a spare key to try to start the car. When she approached the car, the driver's door was slightly open and Jessica's cell phone was lying on the seat with the numbers 9 and 1 displayed on the screen, indicating that she had tried to call 911. Jessica's shoes and keys were found under the front seat while her textbooks, work clothes, and purse were in the back seat. Jessica's mother was worried about Jessica's safety. It was obvious that she had tried to call for help but was unsuccessful. Furthermore, Jessica could not leave her belongings in the car and leave. Jessica's parents contacted her school, learning that Jessica had not come to class that day. When Jessica's best friend at work called her parents a few hours later saying that Jessica had not come to work, they became even more worried about Jessica. Jessica's parents immediately contacted the police, but the sheriff downplayed the situation, suggesting that Jessica might have wandered off and would return home on her own. Despite Jessica's parents' pleas, the sheriff refused to open an investigation. Undeterred, Jessica's parents contacted relatives, friends, and acquaintances, but no one had any information about Jessica's whereabouts. They then searched the entire town, scouring the area, but there was no sign of her. The next morning, Jessica's parents returned to the sheriff's office to report that she had not returned home. The sheriff sent 2 officers to check Jessica's car. However, the officers searched the car without wearing gloves, potentially destroying evidence. Furthermore, the officers did not search Jessica's room. Feeling frustrated with the police, Jessica's parents sought the help of the local media, hoping to draw attention to Jessica's disappearance and the police's lack of attention. Jessica's family and friends, led by her father and Uncle Stanley, launched a search for Jessica. They also distributed flyers with information about Jessica. Fearing the worst, they focused their search on an area near a river, which was known to be a crime hub. For hours, Jessica's family members thoroughly searched the challenging terrain near the river, but couldn't find any sign of Jessica. The next morning, Jessica's parents were at home and their son was playing in the yard. Suddenly, he rushed inside, saying he had heard a faint cry for help that sounded exactly like his sister's voice. Jessica's father immediately grabbed his gun and ran outside to find the source of the screams. At the same time, his brother arrived and joined the search. They quickly noticed smoke coming from the property of their neighbor, 40-year-old David Brooks. As they approached, they saw Brooks undressing on his property. Jessica's father asked Brooks for permission to search his farm, but Brooks refused and told them to leave. This was not the only unusual behavior Brooks displayed. Before Jessica's disappearance, the two families had a normal relationship. However, soon after, he would drive slowly past their house, staring at them with an ominous smile. After seeing Brooks burning clothes on their property, Jessica's parents went back to the police, shared their concerns, and asked them to come and meet Brooks with the dogs. The police agreed. The dogs were given some of Jessica's clothes to track her scent. They led the police to Brooks's fire pit, but no significant evidence was found. However, the dogs did find black gloves in one of Brooks's sheds that smelled like decomposition. During the search, no concrete evidence was found. Frustrated with the police, Jessica's father contacted the FBI for help. The FBI usually does not get involved in missing persons cases based on the family's request, but this time they decided to investigate immediately. After Jessica's parents presented the case and the family's findings, the FBI opened a full-scale investigation. The FBI proceeded to collect fingerprints from Jessica's room and her car, confiscating all potential evidence for further analysis. Additionally, investigators conducted a comprehensive search of the area using helicopters and volunteers. They thoroughly examined the pond near Jessica's home. The FBI searched Brooks' farm and found a printed photo of Jessica. This discovery led the FBI to strongly suspect Brooks in her disappearance. They also suspected his 35-year-old brother, Joseph, although despite a thorough search, the FBI found no evidence. Due to lack of incriminating evidence, the investigation focused on searching the surrounding area. 17 days after Jessica went missing, police received a call on September 27th. A woman was driving along a road near the river. Noticing something unusual near a tree, the woman stopped to check and was horrified to see a body. She called the police immediately. When FBI agents arrived, they discovered the body of a young woman who had suffered severe trauma. She was missing several fingers and toes. A rope tied around her legs showed traces of red and silver paint. Additionally, some of her clothing was missing, suggesting that she may have been sexually assaulted, leading the FBI to develop disturbing theories about the murder. Medical experts later confirmed the identity and determined that Jessica had been strangled. Her body also showed extensive bruising. Her limbs and fingers had been separated after death, suggesting that she was still alive when this happened. However, the most disturbing fact was that Jessica had survived for approximately 3 days after she went missing. This meant that the police had the opportunity to rescue her. But unfortunately, they did not take any action to do so. After the body was discovered, the FBI re-interviewed Brooks, who changed his story. He initially said he had seen Jessica near her home, but later said he had not seen her. His alibi was disputed by his wife, and he failed a polygraph test, prompting the FBI to arrest him and proceed to trial. The FBI said the likelihood of a conviction was low due to a lack of concrete evidence. While they had some troubling clues that pointed to his involvement, they were circumstantial and inconclusive. As the trial progressed, detectives continued to search for additional evidence. During a re-examination of Brooks' car, they found a rope similar to the one used to tie Jessica up. However, analysis showed no DNA on the rope. Brooks' trial began in January 2003. His attorney maintained his innocence, citing a lack of evidence. During the trial, it was revealed that investigators had found the victim's missing limbs but had not properly preserved them, causing them to decompose and lose potential evidence. The remaining circumstantial evidence was insufficient to convict, and the jury was unable to reach a unanimous decision, resulting in Brooks' acquittal. Under state law, he could only be brought back if new evidence was discovered. Jessica's parents were devastated by the outcome. The parents also felt that if the police had done their job properly, Jessica might still be alive. Over time, the case went cold and was largely abandoned, leaving the family without closure. In 2012, a new detective, Lynn Hunt, joined the local police department and was tasked with reviewing unsolved cases. Lynn Hunt began by examining the murder case of Jessica. However, she was shocked to find that the original investigation was poorly handled, with case files containing errors and lacking key information from interviews with relevant parties. The evidence was also not properly documented, forcing Lynn Hunt to start the investigation from scratch 13 years after the crime. Hunt met with Jessica's family and obtained a box of her belongings that had been kept in her car at the time of the murder. One of her brothers, now an adult, had kept the box since the police returned the items to the family. Lynn Hunt was again disappointed by the careless handling of the evidence, as it had not been stored according to protocol. Her efforts paid off when she discovered a crucial document, Brooks' medical examination report, which revealed that Brooks had an IQ of 61, which is considered low. With a low IQ, Brooks may not have fully understood the questions and may have given incomplete answers. All of this led Lynn Hunt to think that this man might not have anything to do with the case. Lynn Hunt began to consider other suspects. Lynn Hunt conducted an extensive review of everyone connected to the case and those living in the surrounding area. This investigation continued until September 2014, nearly 15 years after Jessica's death. The coworker contacted Lynn Hunt with information about an inmate at the Kentucky State Prison who claimed to know who killed Jessica. Lynn Hunt initially dismissed the information as unreliable. Many inmates make up stories to get released early. However, Lynn Hunt verified the information before dismissing it. Lynn Hunt visited the prison and met a man who told her that he had previously shared a cell with another inmate. During conversations, the inmate revealed to him that he was responsible for the murder of Jessica Dishon. The informant revealed that Stanley Dishon, Jessica Dishon's uncle, had a dark secret. According to the informant, Stanley confessed to years of sexual abuse of Jessica while they lived under the same roof. He warned her that if she spoke about the abuse, he would kill her or someone she cared about. When Jessica started dating in the spring of 1999, Stanley became increasingly fearful that she might confide in her boyfriend about the abuse she had suffered at his hands. On September 10th, Stanley visited Jessica at her home when she was alone, and he saw her packing her belongings into her car. He approached her and asked her to end her relationship with her boyfriend. However, Jessica refused, threatening to expose Stanley's actions if he did not leave her alone. As Stanley threatened her, causing Jessica to reach for the phone to call 911. Stanley tried to grab her, but she broke free and ran back to her room. Stanley followed her into her room, striking her before binding her with her own sheets. Stanley then dragged her to an abandoned shed not far from where her body would later be discovered. Stanley held Jessica captive for several days, subjecting her to abuse and torture before ultimately killing her. Stanley then placed her body in a visible location near the road and buried the bloody sheets under the shed. Additionally, Stanley removed some of Jessica's limbs in an attempt to mislead the police, making it seem like the murder was the work of drug traffickers. Lynn Hunt was intrigued to discover that this crucial detail about the missing limbs had never been made public. Only Jessica's closest relatives were aware that her body had been mutilated, which meant the informant couldn't have fabricated this information. Furthermore, Stanley claimed to have buried Jessica's shoe under a broken tree near the shed. Determined to verify the informant's story, Lynn Hunt decided to search for buried evidence. With limited resources at the local police department, She enlisted the help of Jessica's brother and other relatives, keeping Stanley's possible guilt a secret. She did not report her suspected evidence to them. On the first day of the search, no clues were found despite searching the areas described by the informant. The next day, Jessica's brother and Lynn Hunt returned to the scene. On the way, they noticed an abandoned barn on the side of the road and decided to search. Inside the barn, they began digging. Their search uncovered a buried bed sheet. Lynn Hunt collected the evidence and rushed to Jessica's home. Since her disappearance, her parents had left her room unchanged, which helped in verifying the evidence. Upon comparison, Lynn Hunt confirmed that the bed sheet was indeed from Jessica's bedding as it matched the pattern of the other linens and was missing from her bed. Following this discovery, Stanley was arrested and questioned by police. Although he appeared visibly shaken during questioning, he refused to confess to the crime. Stanley was eventually charged with murder and the case went to trial. This news shocked Jessica's father. The murderer he had been searching for was none other than his own brother Stanley Dishon. As the trial progressed, Lynn Hunt dug into Stanley's past to gather more evidence. She knew that he had assaulted Jessica, but her investigation uncovered that several of Stanley's female relatives had come forward to report that he had sexually abused them as children. Stanley would approach his relatives, claiming he was temporarily homeless and asked to stay at their home. However, when left alone with the young girls in their homes, Stanley would sexually assault them, threatening them to ensure their silence. Based on multiple similar accounts, police deduced that Stanley had been engaging in this behavior for approximately 3 decades. Lynn Hunt knew full well that a conviction for murder would be difficult, given the lack of direct evidence, such as fingerprints or DNA linking Stanley to the crime. Undeterred, Lynn Hunt continued her investigation and stumbled upon a box of old case files that had not been examined before. As she sifted through the boxes, Lynn Hunt was once again frustrated with the police who had originally handled the case. She noticed a letter dated June 26, 2002. A concerned person had written to the police at the time, recounting a story identical to one Lynn Hunt later heard from an inmate at the Kentucky penitentiary. In the summer of 2002, Stanley was serving a sentence for assaulting a minor family member. While in prison, he confided in a fellow inmate about killing his niece, Jessica. Unbeknownst to Stanley, his fellow inmate was a police informant who soon wrote a detailed letter to the police investigating the case, exposing the horrific events surrounding Jessica's death. However, police believed Brooks was the prime suspect at the time, causing them to ignore other potential leads. This inaction left Lynn Hunt deeply frustrated, becoming frustrated with the lack of professionalism of his colleagues. If the police had done their job properly, this case could have been solved in 2002. After all these years, Lynn Hunt could only hope that Stanley would finally face justice for his actions at the upcoming trial. The process began in 2015 when Stanley appeared in court, pleading not guilty. Jessica's parents were furious. The prosecution believed that a guilty verdict on the murder charges would be difficult due to a lack of evidence. There were also assault charges against other female family members. The prosecution would need these family members to testify in court, sharing explicit details about Stanley's actions against them. Given these challenges, the prosecution decided to offer Stanley a plea deal. In exchange for dropping the death penalty, Stanley would have to plead guilty to both the assaults on his relatives and Jessica's murder. Ultimately, Stanley accepted the deal and pleaded guilty. Jessica's parents, who wanted the truth, were unhappy with this arrangement, but Stanley remained silent in accordance with the terms of the plea deal. Stanley was sentenced to 20 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. Since he was 56 years old at the time of his conviction, he could be released at age 71. Kansas City is located in the western part of the state of Missouri. With a population of more than 500,000 people, it is the largest city in Missouri. One of the city's most iconic landmarks is the Kansas City Power and Light District, which offers an array of restaurants, shops, and entertainment venues. Visitors can also explore the city's vibrant art scene at the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art and the Kaufman Center for the Performing Arts. However, amidst all this beauty and excitement, It's hard to forget the shocking crime that once occurred in this very city. Back in the 1950s, in the wealthy Mission Hills neighborhood of Kansas City, a multimillionaire named Robert Greenlee Sr. had everything one could ever ask for. He was a car dealer who owned dealerships across the country. He had made his fortune by introducing General Motors vehicles to the Great Plains in the early 20th century. On February 3, 1947, at the age of 65, his life changed forever with the birth of his son, who he named Robert Bobby Cosgrove Greenlees Jr. Bobby's mother, Virginia Pollock, was Robert's second wife. The Greenlees family lived in luxury and were devoted to their beloved Bobby. He was not an only child, but he had an elder sister named Virginia who was born in 1941. He also had a half-brother named Paul who was born in 1917. Paul was Robert's son from his first marriage. In 1953, at the age of 6, Bobby was attending the prestigious Notre Dame de Seine, a private Catholic school located at 3823 Locust Avenue in Kansas City. There he learned and grew with his peers. Everything was going fine and the future looked bright for Bobby. However, fate had other plans for the young boy and his family. The morning of September 28, 1953 was like any other day at Bobby's school, Notre Dame de Seine. However, little did anyone know that this day would soon take a tragic turn. At around 11 a.m., Sister Moran, the nun on duty for the day, opened the school door and she was greeted by a plump woman, claiming to be Bobby's aunt. The woman explained that the boy's mother, Virginia, had suffered a heart attack while shopping at the County Club Plaza and had been rushed to St. Mary's Hospital. She went on to say that the Greenlees family had instructed her to take the child to his mother immediately. Without a second thought, Sister Moran went to retrieve Bobby from his classroom. The innocent 6-year-old, trusting of adults, had no reason to question the woman's identity or intentions. As he took the woman's hand, the nun watched as they both got into a cab and drove off. She assumed that everything was in order. Little did anyone know that the woman was not Bobby's aunt, and the events of that day would change the Greenlees families forever. The phone call that Virginia received less than an hour after Bobby was taken by the unknown woman was one that would forever haunt her. On the other end of the line was Sister Martha Anna, another nun from Bobby's school, who had called the family's home to inquire about Virginia's supposed heart attack. The nun was stunned to know that nothing of the sort had happened. Virginia was not in the hospital, and she had not had a heart attack. It soon dawned on both the nun and Virginia that something sinister was at play here, and it did not take them long to realize that Bobby had been kidnapped. After getting off the phone with Sister Martha, Virginia immediately contacted her husband, Robert, and explained to him everything that had happened. Robert was also as shocked and bewildered as his wife was. Without wasting time, he contacted the Kansas City Police Department to report the crime. The FBI was also called in to assist with the situation. Panic gripped the city as news of Bobby's kidnapping spread. The authorities launched a massive manhunt for the missing boy, but their efforts were hampered by the fact that they had no leads on the woman who had taken him. As the hours ticked by, hope began to fade. But then, on the same day that Bobby had been taken, his parents received the first of several ransom letters. The letter was signed by someone calling themselves M, and it demanded $600,000 for Bobby's safe return. The amount of money was staggering, equivalent to over $6 million in today's currency. But the demands didn't stop there. M also insisted that the ransom money be paid, and small denomination notes of 10s and 20s. The authorities were informed of the ransom letter, and they began working tirelessly to track down the mysterious M and secure Bobby's release. The following day, September 29, 1953, brought another ransom letter. This time, the letter came along with a pin that Bobby had been wearing on the day he was kidnapped. Robert, desperate to secure his son's release, decided to go gather the ransom money, and so he reached out to trusted friends and associates for help. One of them was Arthur Eisenhower, the executive vice president at Commerce Trust Company. He was also the brother of the President of the United States at that time. One thing Eisenhower did was to ensure that every bank clerk handling the ransom money made know of the serial numbers on all of the bills. These were later printed in newspapers around the country. The agonizing wait for Bobby's safe return seemed never-ending as his family continued to gather the exorbitant ransom demanded by the kidnapper. During this time, a man called the Greenlease residence multiple times to reassure Virginia that her son was alive. The kidnapper seemed to enjoy his twisted game, even as the family was plunged into despair. Over the course of a week, the family received a total of 6 ransom letters and 15 phone calls. They also agreed to comply with all the kidnappers, however. It would not be long before they realized that they had made a terrible mistake. By the evening of October 4th, 1953, Robert had gathered the staggering sum of $600,000 in ransom money for the safe return of his son. The money was then placed in a duffel bag and taken to a bridge near Highway 40, just east of Kansas City. It was the largest ransom ever paid in American history at that time. Early the next morning, the kidnappers made contact with the Greenleases to confirm that they had retrieved the money and that Bobby would be returned within 24 hours. But as the day went on, there was still no word about the boy's whereabouts. The family waited anxiously for any news, but none came. The Greenleases were left to wonder if their son was alive or if they had been betrayed by the kidnappers. The suspense was unbearable, and it seemed like their worst fears were about to be realized. The next 24 hours would prove to be the most difficult and heartbreaking time in their lives. As the search for Bobby continued, an ex-con and cab driver named Joe Carr was about to play a crucial role in the investigation. He had been hired in the state of St. Louis by a man named Carl Austin Hall to be his personal chauffeur. From what Carr knew, Hall was new in town and was throwing money around like it was going out of style. Hall had rented an apartment, bought new clothes, and was living like a king. Carr was suspicious of Hall's behavior and decided to contact Joe Costello, his boss at the cab company. Costello was a man who had ties with the mob, and in addition to this, he also had connections within the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. The sun had set on October 6, 1953, when Lieutenant Louis Shoulders and Patrolman Elmer Dolan received a tip from Costello about the man flaunting large amounts of money in St. Louis. They immediately rushed to the apartment where Hall was staying and apprehended him. Inside the room, the officers found 2 hefty metal suitcases filled to the brim with cash. It was an unbelievable sight. Hall was then escorted to the Newstead police station in North St. Louis, where the authorities interrogated him about the source of the money. At first, Hall was insistent they had done nothing wrong, but investigators soon began to put the pieces of the puzzle together. They suspected Hall was involved in the Greenlease kidnapping, given the amount of money he had on him. After some interrogation, Hall finally cracked and confessed to his role in the crime. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. When asked about the whereabouts of Bobby, he revealed the boy was dead. Hall revealed they had not acted alone. He had a partner in crime, a woman named Bonnie Hetty. Together they had hatched the plan to kidnap Bobby and extort his wealthy parents for a hefty ransom. With Hall's confession and a thorough background check, investigators were able to piece together the timeline of events and uncover the shocking details of how the kidnapping occurred. It was a web of deceit and betrayal, with greed at the center of it all. Authorities found out that Hall came from a well-to-do family. He was the son of a lawyer. When his parents passed away, he inherited their 1,100-acre property in Pleasanton, Kansas, along with a substantial inheritance. However, Hall took a turn for the worse as he went on a downward spiral, wasting his fortune getting divorced and falling into addiction. His life hit rock bottom when he was sent to the Missouri State Penitentiary for robbing a cab driver of a mere $38. While in prison, Paul dreamed of one big score that would set him up for life, and that's when he remembered the wealthy Greenlease family. You see, years prior, Paul had attended a military reform academy with Bobby's older, adopted half-brother Paul, and that was when he had gotten to know about the family's wealth. In no time, Paul hatched a plan for a ransom payout. All that was left was to figure out just how to abduct the child. That's where Bonnie came into the picture. Bonnie was a woman of many contradictions. Despite being the beneficiary of a sizable inheritance from her father, she still indulged in prostitution and wild parties. She also seemed to have a thing for criminals. Her first husband was a bank robber who met his end in a hail of bullets from the police. But her second marriage didn't fare any better. and she ended up inheriting a house from the divorce settlement. It was in the bar of Hotel Robidoux, Missouri, that Bonnie crossed paths with Hall. Perhaps it was fate, or maybe just the universe aligning, but their chance meeting marked the beginning of a dark and twisted partnership. As the months passed, Hall gradually revealed his twisted scheme to Bonnie, and to his relief, she was all too eager to participate. And so, in the summer of 1953, Hall and Bonnie began trailing the Greenlees family, like two hungry wolves, stalking their prey. They watched as the family went about their daily routines, hoping to find a weak spot to exploit. At first, they planned to snatch the Greenlees' daughter, Sue, but they soon realized that Bobby, the 6-year-old son, would be an easier target. They knew that they had to act fast if they wanted to make the big score. And with this, the stage was set for the kidnapping that shook the nation to its core. Bonnie had been the one that pretended to be Bobby's aunt and picked him up from school without raising any alarms. Following this, Bonnie and Bobby were then dropped off at a drugstore where Hull was waiting. Paul took control of the situation, driving them across state lines to a vacant field in Overland Park, Kansas. Bonnie got out of the car and walked a short distance, leaving Bobby alone with Hull, who had no intention of keeping him alive. At first, Paul tried to take Bobby's life by using a piece of rope, but the rope was too short. Frustrated and angry, Hull punched Bobby in the face, knocking out one of his teeth. Bobby fell to the car's floor, and that's when Hull pulled out his .38 caliber pistol and shot him at point-blank range. Bobby did not survive for more than 30 minutes after he was abducted. After carrying out the evil deed, both Hull and Bonnie knew they had to get rid of the evidence. They drove to Bonnie's home in St. Joseph, Missouri, with Bobby's lifeless body wrapped in a plastic bag. They then carefully placed the bag in a pre-dug grave in the backyard. To conceal the stench of the dead body, they dumped a large amount of lime onto the bag. Hull then planted chrysanthemums over the grave, hoping to disguise it as a flower garden. Now, when Hull and Bonnie got their hands on the ransom money, they wasted no time in escaping across the state to St. Louis. Their Hull had purchased a pair of metal suitcases to stash the money. He and Bonnie also found an apartment on Arsenal Street, with the view of Tower Grove Park, and there they celebrated their newfound fortune by drinking their hearts out. As the night wore on, Bonnie's drunkenness began to get the better of her, and she dozed off. This was the perfect opportunity for Hull to put another plan he had into action. In the middle of the night, he put $2,000 in Bonnie's purse and slipped out of the apartment with the rest of the loot. Hull then took a cab to the Coral Court Motel in Marlboro, Missouri, and along the way, he picked up a prostitute named Sandra O'Day. He planned to use Sandra's help to divert the police's attention. Before his arrest, Hull arranged for her to fly to Los Angeles and mail a letter he had written to the Greenlees family. Doing this would have thrown the police off his trail. There are rumors that Sandra had also at some point caught sight of the ransom money Paul had been carrying about, and she had been the one that reported it to the police. It is, however, not clear if there is any truth in this. Hull is also believed to have bought 2 garbage cans and a shovel. He then drove a rental car to a spot along the Merrimack River in St. Louis County to hide the ransom money. But unfortunately for Hull, he didn't find a suitable spot to bury the cans, and so he kept the money with him. It wasn't long after this that he was arrested. After all these revelations got out in the open, police spring into action. Bonnie was tracked down and arrested in the apartment Hull had left her in. Both of them were indicted for capital murder and kidnapping, facing the full force of the law for their crime. On October 7, 1953, Bobby's remains were discovered where they had been buried. 2 days later, on October 9th, a solemn funeral was held at St. Agnes Catholic Church, where loved ones and community members gathered to mourn the tragic loss of this innocent boy. Bobby was laid to rest with tears and heavy hearts, forever remembered as a victim of one of the most heinous crimes in American history. As for the 2 kidnappers, justice was swift for them. Because the crime had crossed state lines, the case became a federal one. And on October 30th, 1953, Paul and Bonnie appeared in a court and pleaded guilty to the charges against them. The jury took just 1 hour and 8 minutes to deliberate before recommending a death sentence. Less than a month later, on November 19, 1953, Both Hall and Bonnie accepted their fates and made no attempt to appeal the verdict. They were executed together in the Missouri gas chamber on December 18, 1953, a mere 81 days after the kidnapping. At the time of their death, Bonnie was 41, while Hall was 34 years old. The aftermath of Bobby's kidnapping and murder was not without its twists and turns. Hall and Bonnie's execution may have brought closure to the Greenlees family, but it also brought to light a startling revelation. Now, when Hall was arrested, only half the ransom money was recovered. A total of $312,000 was unaccounted for. It was believed that Lieutenant Shoulders and Patrolman Dolan, the officers who arrested Hall, had stolen the missing money. However, they initially denied this, claiming that they had brought all the money with them to the police station. Eventually, they were federally indicted and convicted of perjury. On April 15, 1954, Shoulders was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Dolan, on the other hand, received a 2-year prison sentence. But this story didn't end there. In a shocking turn of events, Shoulders died in 1962. Once this happened, Dolan revealed to the FBI that Shoulders and Joe Costello, the mob boss, had actually stolen half of the ransom money. Dolan had been too scared to speak up earlier for fear of retribution, and it wasn't until Shoulders and Costello had passed away that he finally revealed the truth. For his cooperation, Dolan received a pardon from President Lyndon B. Johnson in July 1965. With this, Bobby's tragic tale came to an end. As we reflect on the tragic events that occurred in 1953, we are reminded that justice was ultimately served for Bobby, but at a great cost. We must continue to ask ourselves, how can we prevent such tragedies from happening again? So what lessons can we learn from Bobby's case? And how can we use this knowledge to build a safer and more just society for all? Of Esmeralda Riches. Today we will find ourselves in the state that occupies almost 3/4 of the island of Haiti. It is the Dominican Republic. Our story begins on the Aza Coast, one of the most popular beaches of the Dominican Republic. A black Honda Accord stopped in a parking lot by the beach. Music was playing softly in the car as 2 men and 3 girls were talking passionately about general topics. They looked like longtime friends who had met for a fun outing. All the passengers got out of the car and walked leisurely towards the sea. A grown man called out to one of the girls and took her hand. He whispered something in her ear and she shouted to her friends that she would come back later. The beach was practically deserted in the evening, making it a place of rendezvous and solitude. They hurriedly got into the car and talked for a long time. The man stroked her long hair and touched her plump lips, which, like a powerful magnet, attracted his kisses. A few hours after the walk, the girl returned home and went to bed. The next morning, her mother noticed that her daughter had not come to breakfast. She went to her daughter's room and knocked on the door, hoping that the knock would wake her up. But she was met with silence. The woman entered the room and screamed. At the scream, the girl's father came running in. A terrible picture appeared before the parents. The whole bed was flooded with blood, and in the bathroom, on the floor in a pool of blood, lay their daughter. She was dead. From what they saw, the couple's legs gave out, but the father found the strength to call the police. Around 8 a.m., police arrived at the scene, examined the girl's room, and interviewed the parents. The body was taken to the National Institute of Forensic Medical Examination to establish the cause of death. The parents cried and wondered what could have happened to their daughter at home at night. But unfortunately, the events preceding this tragedy began to develop much earlier and escaped the parents' eyes. Today, before us will be a modern story of impossible love between a grown man and a young girl. She was 16-year-old Esmeralda Riches Martinez, born August 23, 2006, in the province of Leota Gracia, in the family of restaurant owners Elio Rosti and Isabel Martinez Richers. She grew up in a complete, happy family and had an older sister with whom she was very friendly. Esmeralda grew up to be a very pretty and bright girl. She loved to sing, dance, and displayed her special artistry, which she was proud to show in videos for social media. In 2023, Esmeralda was in her senior year of high school and was planning to go to university. She was always surrounded by friends because the girl's cheerfulness attracted not only her peers to her. 35-year-old John Kelly Martinez was among Esmeralda's close friends. John Kelly entered the public education system after passing a competitive teacher's exam and was undergoing induction for new teachers. He was still on probation, which lasted for 1 year. The pupils took a great liking to the new teacher as he treated them like friends and had regular outings outside of school. Despite the fact that John was married to another teacher and had 2 daughters, he devoted most of his free time to his students. For a long time, the teacher painstakingly built a trusting relationship with them, disposing them to him. They were mostly bright and beautiful students, such as Esmeralda. The evening walk on February 12, 2023, was a perfectly normal meeting of teacher and female students outside of school. Esmeralda was the last person John Kelly picked up that evening. He followed her into the house, introduced himself as a teacher, and promised to bring her back home. The group of 2 grown men and 3 young female students then headed to the beach in Teacher Kelly's car. After stopping, everyone got out of the car except John Kelly and Esmeralda. John and Esmeralda were alone for a while, but afterward joined the company. They drank a few beers and took a short walk along the shoreline. Suddenly, Esmeralda felt sick. The girl started bleeding during the walk, forcing them to cut it short and bring her back home. In the morning, her parents found her dead. An autopsy revealed that it was a homicide, but the parents did not get answers to their questions. The National Institute of Forensic Medicine tentatively determined that Esmeralda Rich's death was due to a perineal laceration with severe internal bleeding and hemorrhagic shock following violent acts. As a result of the autopsy, the girl's death was classified as a violent death of undetermined cause. However, the question remained, who dared to do such a thing when Esmeralda was in familiar company on a walk supervised by a teacher? Interviews with the girlfriends and a review of the seized phones provided clarity and identified the first suspect. The testimony of one of the girls who had been out with the teacher and Esmeralda that evening was stunning. She said she saw the professor slip 5 pills into Esmeralda's drink while they were on the beach. The initial findings of the police sparked a lot of talk in the Dominican Republic, where abortion is banned. There was a lot of speculation in the community about the cause of Esmeralda's death. Some said she died of a heart attack, while others were sure she died from blood loss caused by the abortion pills John Kelly had allegedly given her. Everyone hoped that the medical examiner's report would put an end to the rumors and speculation. However, all the speculation dissipated when the results of the forensic examination were ready. Upon learning the results, which ruled out the possibility of pregnancy, Esmeralda's relatives were clearly puzzled and very skeptical. The victim's relatives stated that the family was unhappy that the report ruled out Esmeralda's pregnancy because this theory best matched what investigators had found out based on the forensic examiner's tests and findings, as well as the evidence collected during the investigation. After all, a review of Esmeralda's friends revealed many text messages that, although indirectly, indicated the teacher's long-term interest in the student. After the unsuccessful version of pregnancy, the investigation concluded that John Kelly drugged the girl without her consent and roughly abused her on the beach, which led to profuse blood loss and, a few hours later, to the death of Esmeralda. The results of repeated toxicology tests were pending. Given the progress of the investigation, the prosecutor's office requested a coercive measure against John Kelly Martinez and his alleged accomplice, Ruben Murillo Martinez, as they are the main suspects in the young woman's death. John Kelly Martinez was suspended as a teacher for 90 days without pay because of the evidence collected against him. The prosecutor's office requested a year of preventive detention against John Kelly as the prime suspect in Esmeralda's death. Preventive detention is the imprisonment of a person, not as a punishment for a crime they have committed, but as a means of preventing the possible commission of criminal acts by that person for a period of time. New episodes and interviews with witnesses about the student's death, however, have created even more intrigue surrounding this horrific tragedy. After several interrogations, authorities learned that due to severe bleeding, the entire company had to stop several times along the way to help her. But no one took the bleeding Esmeralda to the hospital or called emergency services. Some of these stocks were captured by surveillance cameras where, according to witnesses, The defendants bought alcoholic beverages and Esmeralda and John went into the restroom together. Later, they also went into the pharmacy to buy medicine, water, and feminine hygiene pads. It was later established that Esmeralda had to completely change her clothes at one of the stops because her own were completely soaked in blood. After Esmeralda was taken home, her parents also noticed that she was bleeding heavily. Thinking it was a woman's menstrual cycle, the mother simply gave her daughter a painkiller to help her fall asleep. It was later discovered from one of the girls' cell phones that Esmeralda had sent her friend an audio message in the early morning hours, asking for help and saying, "Please help me, I'm bleeding." Unfortunately, the friend listened to the recording too late the next day, and Esmeralda was found lifeless on the floor of her bathroom, covered in blood. On February 14th, John Kelly Martinez was arrested by police, and his home was searched the following day. During the search, the clothes he was wearing on the night out with his female students were seized. His cousin, Ruben Murillo, who was the second man present that night, was also accused of trying to hide John's bloody pants. There were many ambiguities in the investigation into the event, and the prosecutor's office should have clarified the situation, rather than making new speculations about an incident that alarmed the public. The public demanded a thorough investigation to determine the real cause of the young girl's death, as many felt that obvious facts on the surface had not been taken into account by the investigators. The investigation involved not only a search of the house where the teacher and his family lived, but also the car in which the crime against Esmeralda may have taken place, triggering the bleeding. The authorities urgently requested the car, but it was discovered that John Kelly's wife had sold it in a hurry. The investigation believed that the hasty sale of the car was an attempt to hide evidence that could prove violent acts. The purchaser of the automobile was Panaga Pillar. After it was learned that a coercive measure would be sought for alleged complicity in the case against J.C. Espinal-Rijo, John Kelly's wife, and Frank Panaga, the new owner of the car, the vehicle was finally inspected. However, other than traces of Esmeralda's blood found in the car, no other evidence was discovered. The court ruling determined that there was insufficient evidence to keep J.C. Espinal-Rijo in jail, and she was released. The investigation continued for several months, and the prosecutor launched his own inquiry, re-interviewing the three girls who accompanied Esmeralda. Their testimony helped investigators reconstruct the events of that night, minute by minute. At 7:30 p.m., Jean Kelly Martinez, 35, and his cousin Ruben Murillo Martinez went to the home of Esmeralda Reaches in Lautra, Bandague, with three other girls in the passenger compartment. The car. John excused Esmeralda from her mother, introducing himself as her teacher and telling her of the exciting evening that awaited her daughter and the other students. Esmeralda went along with him. Turned out that originally the whole group was going to go to the fair with amusement rides, but on the way John changed his mind and altered the destination. Most likely, John Kelly did not intend to go to the fair, but preferred a quiet Mau Beach. On the way to the beach, John stopped the car at a store where he bought a beer. Returning to the car, he asked his brother to sit in the back seat while Esmeralda sat in the front. The man had a thermos with him, into which he poured the beer and added 5 unknown pills to the drink. He offered it to Esmeralda without informing her of the contents of the thermos, but one of the go-offens noticed. Arriving at the beach, the three girls got out of the car, leaving Esmeralda and John Kelly alone. They were alone in the car for about 30 minutes, and their prolonged absence was noticed by Esmeralda's friends. After a moment, without explanation, John appeared and told everyone to get in the car as they were leaving urgently. They had to make several stops along the way because Esmeralda started bleeding heavily. One of the stops was at 9:45, when they stopped at a gas station parking lot. According to eyewitnesses and CCTV footage, Esmeralda used the cafeteria restroom. Esmeralda's classmate said she asked to stop at the gas station because she needed to visit the ladies' room, and when she went in there with her friends, they noticed her clothes were soaked with blood. There was a lot of blood in the restroom, so much so that the girls had to mop the floor. The girlfriends tried to help Esmeralda. They were very frightened and asked the woman working at the gas station if it was normal, and she said it was not normal and advised them to see a doctor immediately. The girls told John Kelly about it, but the man refused to go to the hospital, saying that if he did, he would go to jail. According to the inspection document, traces of Esmeralda Rich's blood were found both in the parking lot and in the service restroom. At the gas station, they also stopped at a pharmacy at 10:21 p.m. where they bought some medication, water, and sanitary pads. Authorities obtained surveillance footage and a receipt for the purchase to verify the fact. At 11 p.m., John Kelly returned Esmeralda to her home. She arrived with heavy bleeding that began minutes after she was left alone in the car with her teacher. On February 16th, an official report came back stating that Esmeralda had been very severely and brutally abused, resulting in severe blood loss and hypervolemic shock. As scary as it sounds, this condition could have been stabilized and medics know how to effectively help a person. But unfortunately, Esmeralda never made it into the life-saving hands of doctors that night. Toxicology testing confirmed the presence in Esmeralda's body of the active ingredient in the pills used to terminate a pregnancy, but it was previously confirmed that Esmeralda was never pregnant. This component is a synthetic gestogen with contraceptive effect when taken orally in the recommended dosing regimen. This component suppresses ovulation and fertilization, which most likely indicates that the teacher, John Kelly, was preparing for intimacy with the student he liked. After repeated medical examinations, Esmeralda's body was finally allowed to be buried. The young girl was buried in the Albano Public Cemetery. As Esmeralda's family and friends said goodbye to her, they described her as a kind and cheerful girl. Her parents bitterly recalled that fateful evening and blamed themselves for entrusting their daughter to a teacher and letting her go for an evening walk with him. On June 4, 2023, after reconstructing the last hours of Esmeralda Rich's life, prosecutors filed charges against math and physical education teacher John Kelly Martinez. On June 12, the La Altagracia prosecutor's office filed an indictment and a request to open a trial against Martinez and his cousin, Rubiel Milo Martinez, with the La Altagracia Instructional Court. The case was scheduled to be heard on August 23, 2023. However, due to the passage of Storm Franklin, the case against the teacher was rescheduled. On November 24, 2023, the judge ordered that John be retried as the sole defendant in the death of Esmeralda Riches. The trial was scheduled to begin on January 9, 2024, but was again rescheduled because only half of the witnesses called were present. The trial is scheduled for February 1st and 6th, 2024, before the Collegiate Court of the Penitentiary Chamber of First Instance of La Altagracia. The defense attorney urged the court to note that his client can only be charged with violence and accuses the parents of not taking action to avoid the death of their daughter, despite knowing about her problem. The prosecution, for its part, presented more than 40 pieces of evidence, including witness testimony and examination reports. During the hearing, the prosecution also heard testimony from pathologists and forensic experts, who showed the audience all the audio and video materials that had been collected during the painstaking and long work to determine the cause of the girl's death. In his closing statement, the defendant tried to make himself look like a victim. John Kelly Martinez admitted that he and Esmeralda were indeed close that night in the car, but he sincerely tried to assure the court and everyone present that everything was consensual. The important fact, he said, was that when he brought Esmeralda home, she was alive and well. The motion to compel specifies that Martinez voluntarily inflicted the victim with lacerations, abrasions, and contusions that resulted in her death, with severe acute external and internal bleeding and hemorrhagic shock as the terminal mechanism of death, according to the autopsy report. John Kelly Martinez's speech made no impression on the court or those in the audience. On March 14, 2024, Professor John Kelly Martinez, 36, was sentenced to 20 years in prison for violence. John Kelly Martinez will serve his prison term at the Anemia Correctional and Rehabilitation Center in He. Rubiel Maro Martinez, cousin of the defendant, charged with accessory after the fact, received a conditional enforcement measure consisting of periodic court appearances. Following the enforcement measure against the professor and his cousin, Rich's family attorney, Raimundo Rosario, said the family was satisfied with the restraining measure and would not file a motion to reopen the investigation. The verdict for Hone eased the pain of Esmeralda's parents a bit. They thanked everyone involved in the investigation and trial. They also indicated that they were satisfied with the verdict. Esmeralda's family did not experience the joy of the teacher's verdict, because the acute pain of losing their daughter was forever lodged in their souls. Esmeralda's mother, Isabel Martinez, said she regretted letting her daughter walk with this blessed teacher and 3 friends. I talked to him on the phone and asked, "Are you a teacher?" And he said, "Yes, I am." And I told him, "Take care of my daughter. I'm going to let her out because she's with you." I was innocent that my daughter was with this man, the mother said. The Ministry of Education provided support to the family and relatives of the deceased girl, as well as to the relatives of the other girls who were with Esmeralda on the day of the tragedy. In their message, they expressed their hope that cases of this nature will not be repeated in the education community and in society at large. With the pain of parents who can never come to terms with their daughter's death, they said it is their turn to fight for justice. A story that began as a fun evening outing with a visit to the beach turned into a night of terror that cost the life of student Esmeralda Riches, who bled to death after lacerations, abrasions, and bruises inflicted by a man whose parents entrusted with the lives of their children. Obviously, everyone involved in the evening's outing has a share of blame. Unfortunately, because of her parents' excessive strictness, Esmeralda was afraid to ask them for help and tell them what had happened. Sometimes we think that it is easier to conceal for fear of punishment or just to remain misunderstood. But what a pity that, in this battle, fear wins, taking precious life. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.